Good morning. I'd like to thank you for coming. We know how busy you are. When I drove from Shoreline, where I live, which is on the north end of Seattle, the sun was beaming, and I had to wear sunglasses, and I thought, am I in Seattle? But it was less beaming when I got to see it, the heart of the city. My name is James Banks, and I'm the Killinger Professor in the College of Education here at the University of Washington. And I'm very pleased to welcome you to the Center's 11th Book Talk. The purpose of the Book Talk series is to stimulate dialogue among our faculty and graduate students within the College of Education and an interdisciplinary dialogue with colleagues across campus about ways to increase the academic achievement of students of color, help all students develop positive racial attitudes, and become effective citizens of a democratic society, as well as to learn about the histories and cultures of the various racial, ethnic, cultural, and language groups in the U.S. and around the world. Another purpose of the Book Talk series is to involve teachers and school educators in the outreach activities of the center. And I forgot one important announcement on October 30th. The center will launch its latest publication, which is a major handbook of research on multicultural education around the world. We'll have scholars speaking from around the world, and we'll be launching the Routledge International Companion to Multicultural Education. And this is going to be a big event on campus. It's going to involve many departments, and this will be our second major handbook, the domestic handbook of research on multicultural education, and this one will be a handbook of research on multicultural education around the world. Please put it on your calendar, October 30th. Encourage your friends to come, and we will send, of course, out an announcement. What about our procedure today? Professors Conchas, Gandara, and Contreras will each speak for about 20 minutes. We will then invite participation in a question and answers dialogue. And after the Q&A, Professors Conchas, Gandara, and Contreras will sign copies of their books. And they're very good books, so we hope you will buy up today and buy well. Let me introduce my colleagues. I'm going to introduce them all so that I can get off the stage and stay off till the very end. Dr. Gilberto Conchas is a senior program officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and an associate professor and chancellor's fellow at the University of California, Irvine. His research illuminates students' voices as a way to make meaning of their lives in urban communities and schools. As the son of Mexican immigrant farm workers, Dr. Conchas maintains a strong commitment to promoting school success. He works with communities and schools in order to understand their roles in improving engagement and achievement among youth. Dr. Conchas is the author or co-author of 2 books. I believe they both are here for sale today. The Color of Success, Race and High Achieving Urban Youth, and Small Schools and Urban Youth, Using the Power of School Culture to Engage Students. Dr. Conchas and I have become good and warm friends and colleagues over the last year. I'm pleased to welcome him back to the University of Washington.
Okay, the problems facing urban public schools, just to give you context of what we all hear about. One is we hear about the low test scores. And I'm going to go fast again because I only have 20 minutes. Low grades, the racial achievement gap that we can all take issue at, because is it really a racial achievement gap or is it something else, like economic? The high dropout rates, the poor attendance, the unmotivated students, the burned out and ineffective teachers, dilapidated and unsafe buildings, administrative hopelessness, politicized and inefficient bureaucracies, and the endless series of failed school reform, which is a lot of the issues that Gandara and Contreras talk about in their book. So we hear all about this. But I like to listen to what Gloria Gladstone-Billings said in her 2006 AERA presidential address. There she said, taking together the historic, economic, socio-political, and moral debt that we have amassed towards black, brown, yellow, and red children seems insurmountable, and attempts of addressing it seem futile. Indeed, it appears like a task for Sisyphus. But as legal scholar Derek Bell indicated, just because something is impossible does not mean it is not worth doing. So here are the guiding questions that guide this study. Why do some low-income high school students achieve success despite urban school inequality? How does the structure and culture of urban schools mediate school success? And 3, how do youth experience urban school success? The research focus is that my work explores the origins of low-income students' engagement and success in relationship to the urban school context. And the purpose of the study is to examine how school processes construct success among low-income urban high school students, to show from students' perspectives how institutional mechanisms impact student engagement, and 3, to show how the cultural dimensions of the small school reform efforts matter. And I'm not going to get too deep about the research, but I'll just kind of we hear about segregation and neglect, Orfield, the work of inadequate learning environments, the school culture in terms of low teacher expectations, irrelevant curriculum, etc., family background, the oppositional culture. And this is what actually brought me to look at this phenomena, is that we hear about Agbu, the late anthropologist that for the last 30 or so years dominated our understanding of why is it that some racial minority youth do well and others don't. And he had the dichotomy between voluntary and involuntary minorities. And he, in a nutshell, he said that those that are involuntary, once they perceive that there's this limited opportunity, they give up. But I think that from my research and other research shows that there's much variability within that. And so if in a nutshell I were to say what my work is about, in a sense I marry the cultural ecological paradigm with institutional processes that mediate failure and success among student populations. There's the impact of racial stratification that Suarez Orozco's talk about, and then the downward assimilation. Currently, there is this decline in health, motivation, and achievement as immigrant youth become more acculturated and or assimilated in U.S. society and culture. There's new work being done on this, and I think it was back, and maybe Pat and Francis can help with this, in 1996 when the Suarez Orozcos wrote their book Transformations, they started seeing this phenomena of how more acculturated or subsequent generations of Mexican-American youth were not as motivated as the children of immigrants or the second generation. But many are beating the odds. Patricia Gandara wrote this wonderful book, Over the Ivy Walls. Patricia? Yeah, Over the Ivy Walls, where she looked at successful Chicanos. And she looked at the whole cultural deficient models and trying to complicate that. And also she looked at Agbu's thesis. The impact of school processes, the impact of relationships within schools among peers and teachers, and the impact on these on school engagement. And that's what I want to talk about today. Again, I like to call her the diva of the Harvard Graduate School of Education, Sarah Lawrence Lightfoot. In her 1983 book, The Good High School, she said, "It seemed easy for us to recite all of the problems teachers and students confront and create in secondary schools, but it seemed difficult, even awkward, to find goodness and talk about successes." And that's what the Color of Success is about. How is it that low-income minority youth within this poor urban high school in Northern California achieve success despite the odds? So my research shows, based on Oakland and Boston cases, that school change is a multifaceted process with technical, cultural, and political dimensions. Size is not synonymous with urban school success. And I think I can say that as a Gates person, right? When they invested so much in the small schools movement, size is not synonymous with urban school success. Cultural dimensions of reform efforts matter, such as school school culture, teacher beliefs, and interpersonal relations. So the kind of social scaffolding that I find here is that you need to have supportive, high-achieving peer groups, strong teacher expectations and relationships, college-going culture, healthy race and ethnic relations. As a sociologist at the University of Michigan, my area of expertise is race and ethnic relations. So when I went looking, when I did my study, one of the big issues that I looked at is how do students get along? And how is it that we can actually promote healthy race ethnic relations so students actually get along and learn from each other? Administrative support and demanding academic programs. What I did was a case study methodology, and I'm not going to get into this because I want to get into the meat of it. Are you keeping track, Jim? Oh, then I'll go slower. So it was case study methodology, and this is the rationale for why I did it. Overview of the Color of Success case study. It was a 3-year case study. 3 comparative race ethnic groups, 26 high-achieving Latinos, 27 high-achieving African Americans, and 27 high-achieving Asian American students. These Asian American students were actually Vietnamese. They self-identified as ethnically Chinese of Vietnamese background. Okay? 4 comparative school structures and cultures. Qualitative interviews, focus groups, observation and document analysis, and quantitative, looking at attendance, grades, and we did OLS models to assess social capital. So there's a chapter in the book looking at social capital. Patricia Gandara and others actually did an edited book dedicated to social capital, and I think in your current book you guys talk about social capital as well. Baldwin High School at the time, there were about 1,900 students in grades 9 to 12, 65% African American, 20% Asian American, 10% Latino, 5% white, and 18% English language learners. And there were low income, a few black middle class, there was low income with a few black middle class at the school. Can people guess where this is at in Northern California? Not the school, but Oakland. This was Oakland. So the small learning communities I looked at, you had the advanced placement program. Oh, this works. Thanks, Francis. So you had the advanced placement program that, and if you recall what the school looks like, okay, here's the racial composition. So then you take the small learning communities in the advanced placement program, you only have 15% black, 66% Asian, 14% white, and 5% Latino. This at the time was the worst school in the district, yet it passed 3 times as many kids in the AP exam. So you know that parents wanted their kids there. They were actually, it was an incredible curriculum that these kids got. They practiced the Socratic method, they were reading Marx and Engels, and the teacher said that they wanted to give these kids a private schooling in a public atmosphere. But as you will see later, there was a cost. Then there was the Graphics Academy, which is 25% black, 56% Asian, 9% Latino, and 10% white. Again, not representative of the larger student population. Usually these 2 academies work together. They recruited from one another. Then there was a 3rd academy, which was the Medical Academy. 55% black, 32% Asian, 10 Latino, and 3% white. Although not quite like the larger school, it's still more representative of what the larger school looked like. Race and school culture. Take a minute and read what one of the teachers said. Oh, this is supposed to be my time to take a drink of water. So as a sociologist that studies race-ethnic relations, this was just, a great quote. And it's not just one person saying it. It was something, the patterns observed throughout, where you have on the one hand programs or classes that are one race ethnic group. I like to say it's like the panopticon, Foucault's notion of the panopticon of a prison. You can look inside, right? The school was like a prison with the door and then the little window. If you would go to this high school, it was the same kind of building. But when you looked in, you saw classes of mostly black and Latino students, in some of the courses. And in other courses, you saw courses with just Asians and white kids. And so, here people felt terrorized with one another because they didn't know one another. So there was a lot of unhealthy race-ethnic relations. A lot of the black kids fighting with Asian kids, fighting with Latino kids. But there were certain programs where actually kids got to know each other quite well. So here's the variations in institutional processes. Here's a general school pathway where there was what I call a weak structure and a weak culture. And these were mostly Latino and black youth, and it was consistent with past research, what Agbu talked about. Weak peer networks, low teacher expectations, weak relationship building, and essentially no college-going culture. Then there was this other program, which I called a strong structure and a weak culture. And this was the AP and Graphics Academy. Strong and competitive college-going culture. It promoted school success. It replicated this notion of individualism. But there was a cost. There was this high anxiety and stress among the students. A lot of kids were getting sick all the time. There was this, I take issue with this because we can, complicate that, this whole acting white notion in order to succeed. And Prudence Carter wrote a great book debunking this whole acting white thing. And there was this sense of loss of ethnic identity. But what is not on here, a lot of this high anxiety and stress caused these kids to cheat. In order for them to get attention from the teacher, they had to be the best and do the best, and a lot of them really cheated. Then there was what I call the strong structure and culture. And this was the medical academy. It had a strong college-going culture, promote school success, positive student identity, pro-school ideology, it enhanced race and ethnic relations, strong academic peer groups, and what I call a model of success for urban youth. I'm trying to go fast here. Variations and responses, just to give you a sense. Here's a student in the medical academy. We're like a community because in the medical academy, they're always telling us to work together and more things are going on for us to unite. We help each other to fulfill our goals in school and go into health. Another response is an example in AP and graphics. Oh my God, me being regular English, forget that. That does not look good. I want to be tagged the best. The other programs are seen as easy. That's why I'm in advanced placement. And here's another student in the general track. You have an all-black class, and if you're in there, they take care of those. We are invisible. And there was a Latino student who did not graduate. What do I argue? Structural and cultural processes divided students by race and distributed opportunities among students in a way that reproduced social inequities. Those students who perceive stronger and healthier race and ethnic relations are more engaged in school, whereas those who feel more intimidated by the racial and ethnic climate suffer. Institutional support mechanisms help students achieve success despite their critical consciousness of social inequality. And this is key. Agbu says once they have a critical consciousness, they give up. These kids did not give up. They had a critical consciousness, yet they were still successful. Significant factors and influence that are structural. I still argue that smaller is best. It's not the answer, but in this case, smaller was best, given the cultural dimensions of school reform. Highly qualified teachers, etc. I'm running out of time, so I'll go through this. And here's the significant factors and influences that are the cultural. You have a college-going culture, supportive cross-ethnic community of learners, induce students of varying academic abilities, respectful culture, respectful and supportive peer groups, positive teacher expectations, and strong relationship building. So do the numbers matter? Buy the book and you can read that chapter. Yes, the numbers matter. I took students' perspectives and we test them quantitatively using the NELs. And sure enough, we found that while parents appear to have some influence, the research, particularly for this population, says that the school context matters, in particular teacher expectations and relationships and peer groups. So the limits, and then I can transfer to the next talk. No Child Left Behind. We all know about that. Schools serve future students. Access to some schools remain ambiguous. There's an uneven recruitment process. There's equity and equality issues. Difficult to replicate teacher culture. Difficult to replicate school culture. And structural inequality. What I didn't talk about here is issues of poverty, joblessness, health and nutrition, race and class segregation. And given what's happening today, You know, how do we expect our schools to do a good job if they're not getting the proper funding, if they're not getting the proper resources? Thank you.